How much do you save out of every $100 you earn in the United States? That number is currently only about $3 to $4. The rest disappears into spending, bills, automatic subscriptions, and those just this once moments. But in Japan, more than half of household financial assets are held in cash or bank deposits, not stocks, not locked retirement accounts, but money that can be withdrawn immediately when needed. Same planet. Median income not higher, smaller homes, higher cost of living in many cities. So why is their financial structure significantly more stable? This is not a story about iron discipline, not about Japanese people spending less. In fact, Japan has the highest density of vending machines in the world. Tens of thousands of convenience stores open 24/7. Modern consumer culture is not lacking. So, what creates the difference? The answer begins with a notebook invented in 1904. No algorithm, no app, no green and red charts. Yet more than a century later, modern neuroscience stands on its side. This is the story of how a nation built a completely different financial operating system. And if you have ever wondered, why does your budget always work in theory, but fail in reality? Then perhaps the problem is not your discipline. It is the system you are living in. If we are honest for a moment, the problem is not that you lack discipline. The problem is that the system around you is designed for you to spend. Behavioral economics has said this for years. Richard Thaler, Nobel laureate in economics, calls it the default effect. Humans tend to follow the default option. If the default is auto-renew, you keep paying. If the default is one-click purchasing, you buy. Studies from e-commerce platforms show that simply removing one step in the checkout process significantly increases conversion rates. Frictionless checkout is not designed to help you. It is designed to help revenue. Daniel Kahneman described our brain as operating with two systems. System 1, fast, emotional, impulsive. System 2, slow, rational, analytical. The entire architecture of modern consumption is optimized for System 1. Advertising targets emotion. Social media activates social comparison. One-click payments remove the pause, and that pause is crucial because in that pause, System 2 has a chance to speak. In the United States, the average household owns hundreds of thousands of items. The self-storage industry is worth tens of billions of dollars each year, not because homes are too small, but because there's too much stuff. That is not a shortage of money. It is a waste of value. And this is where Japan is different. There is a Japanese word that has almost no perfect English translation, motenai. It does not simply mean wasteful. It is a genuine discomfort when the value of something is not fully used. This philosophy emerged during the Kamakura period, influenced by Buddhist thought about the interconnectedness of all things. A grain of rice is not just a grain of rice. It is the labor of the farmer, the soil, the water, the time. Throwing it away is not merely discarding food. It is discarding the entire chain of value that created it. Apply that thinking to money. A shirt you wear 3 times and forget. A phone you upgrade while the old one still works. A subscription you have not used for 6 months. In the modern consumer system, that is just a transaction line. In the mindset of motenai, that is value wasted. And that feeling, a slight discomfort before waste, creates psychological friction. It is that friction that changes behavior, not through forced discipline, but through awareness. And here is what is interesting. OECD research on household savings shows that societies with higher levels of aversion to waste tend to maintain larger shares of domestic deposits. In Japan, More than half of household financial assets are held in cash or bank deposits. That is not fear of markets. It is structural stability. Cash acts as a shock absorber when crises occur. The International Monetary Fund has repeatedly emphasized that high domestic savings rates help economies withstand external shocks more effectively. So the difference is not income level. The difference is the operating system. In the United States, the default is spend first, save later. In Japan, the default is awareness first, spend later. And that leads to the second principle, a principle from Okinawa, one of the blue zones where people live the longest in the world. That principle is called Hara Hachi Bu. Eat until you are 80% full. Stop before you are completely full. Longevity studies in Okinawa show this habit is associated with significantly lower rates of cardiovascular disease and obesity. Applied to finance, it becomes an extremely powerful rule. Live on 80% of your income. Save 20% before you spend a single dollar. Order determines outcome. If you earn 100 and spend 100, then try to save what is left. You will always be short. If you earn 100, move 20 away before you even see it, you will learn to live on 80. The brain adapts. Research on hedonic adaptation shows that people adjust their level of satisfaction to their current standard of living. 80% becomes the new 100%, and the initial discomfort fades. This is not abstract theory. If a median income earner transfers 20% immediately upon receiving their salary, within 5 years, even at modest interest rates, they build a financial cushion they have never had before. Not because income increased, but because the order of cash flow changed, and then we arrive at the tool. Not an app, not fintech, a notebook. Invented in 1904 by Hani Motoko. Its name is Kakeibo. And the reason it works is not because it is smarter than an algorithm, it is because it leverages how the brain actually functions. A 2024 study at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology using EEG headsets found that handwriting activates neural networks related to memory and learning far more strongly than typing. Princeton and UCLA researchers have also found that people who write by hand process information more deeply than those who take notes only on laptops. An app records behavior. Handwriting makes you process behavior. When you write $43 eating out because I was tired, didn't want to cook, you do not just see the number. You see the reason. And the reason is what changes behavior. At the end of the month, Kakeibo asks you to answer 4 questions. How much do I have? How much do I want to save? How much did I spend? How can I improve? No push notifications. No red warning colors. Just you and the truth in your own handwriting. That is not mathematics. That is awareness. And awareness is the first step toward financial freedom. The most interesting part is not the notebook. It is the ripple effect. When one individual saves 20% of their income, that is personal discipline. When millions of households do the same, that becomes economic structure. In macroeconomics, household savings are not just idle money. They are domestic capital. A country with a high savings rate is less dependent on hot money flows from abroad, less vulnerable to global financial crises. After the 2008 crisis, multiple studies from the International Monetary Fund and the Bank for International Settlements showed that economies with higher domestic deposit ratios recovered more steadily because their banking systems had more stable funding sources. Japan is a clear example. Its banking system relies largely on household deposits, not on large-scale international borrowing. That creates a buffer. When global markets fluctuate, domestic capital flows remain relatively stable. Household saving, therefore, is not merely a personal habit. It is the foundation of national financial stability. On the other hand, a consumption-driven society heavily reliant on credit leverage may grow quickly, but it is also more fragile when the cycle turns. Research on financial crises shows that high household debt levels often amplify recessions. When income falls, households are forced to cut spending abruptly to service debt. Businesses lose revenue. The downward spiral begins. A high-saving society, by contrast, absorbs shocks more effectively. And this brings us to a deeper point. Kakebo is not just a spending control tool. It is a mechanism for building value awareness. When you write down each expense, you begin to distinguish between consumption and investment, between buying something to fill an emotional gap and buying something that builds long-term capability. In behavioral finance, there is a concept called mental accounting. People categorize money into different buckets in their minds. Kakebo leverages that tendency. But instead of letting the mind categorize automatically, you define the categories consciously. You decide what counts as a need. What is a want? What is growth value? That distinction is extremely important. Research on life satisfaction shows that spending on experiences and personal development tends to generate higher long-term happiness than short-term material consumption. When you begin to see money as a tool serving values rather than a tool for instant gratification, your financial trajectory shifts. And there is another factor rarely discussed: uncertainty. Japan is a country frequently exposed to earthquakes, natural disasters, and historical economic instability. The culture of saving is not just philosophy. It is adaptation to a high-risk environment. In economics, this relates to precautionary saving. When the future feels uncertain, people tend to hold more liquidity. What is fascinating is that when this habit persists across generations, it becomes a social norm. And social norms are stronger than individual motivation. If everyone around you saves, you see that as normal. If everyone around you spends to signal status, you see that as normal too. Economics calls this the peer effect. Financial behavior is contagious. So, the financial operating system of a country is not only about laws or interest rates, it is about the story a society tells itself about money. In one place, money is a tool to signal success. In another, money is a tool to create security. Two different narratives, two different financial structures. And when you return to the original question, why does your budget work in theory but fail in reality? Perhaps it is because you are trying to use a rational tool to solve an emotional problem. An app gives you data, but data does not change belief. Kakeibo forces you to confront your behavior, forces you to ask why. And when the why changes, behavior changes. From there, wealth accumulates. Not through one dramatic decision, but through hundreds of small ones. And this is the key point. Financial freedom rarely comes from a single breakthrough investment. It comes from structure. Structure determines cash flow. Cash flow determines assets. Assets determine freedom of choice. A 120-year-old notebook is not magic. It is simply a tool that creates structure. And structure, when strong enough, defeats willpower. In the end, there is a truth very few people want to admit. Our problem is not a lack of money. Our problem is a lack of structure. Money comes and goes. Income rises and falls. Markets go up and down. But if you cannot control the small daily flows, you will never control large future assets. The Japanese did not become wealthier because they were luckier. They are not more stable because they are more ascetic. They simply built a different operating system. An operating system where waste creates discomfort. Overspending feels wrong. and saving is the default. They did not try to become people of iron discipline. They designed the environment so that the right choice becomes natural. And that is the greatest difference. Financial freedom does not begin with stocks. It does not begin with real estate. It does not begin with crypto. It begins with awareness. With the moment you write down, why did I spend this money? When you see the reason, you regain control. When you regain control, you create margin. And when you have margin, you have choice. Not to get rich quickly, but to avoid being forced, because in the end, the greatest asset is not the balance in your account. It is the ability to say no to things that do not serve your life. You do not need to move to Tokyo. You do not need a new app. You need a notebook, a pen, and 30 days of honesty. If this video helped you see money differently, please press like to support the channel. If you want to build a stronger financial operating system, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Because we are not just talking about making money here, we are talking about how money shapes life. And if you understand cash flow, you understand your own future. See you in the next video.